Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Layover Live. I'm Jason Swig, VP of Strategy and Insights here at SimpleView. Thank you for joining us today. So excited to have you here. And as always, I'm joined by now my amazing co-host, Sandy Jordan. So,
Thanks.
Sandy, I've used incredible, brilliant, and amazing now.
Oh,
right?
wow. Wait, yeah, we're just going to do a whole episode of descriptions of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like the adjective hour, right? That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
Right?
So have you recovered from Summit and that awesome week in Milwaukee?
Listen, it was a long week, great week. First off, first time to Milwaukee. It was an awesome city.
Yeah,
And I
same
mean,
here.
Josh Albrecht and the team over there were awesome.
Very cool.
And yeah, I really enjoyed it there. We were able to catch an NBA game while we were out there. So we had a little time to do that. Great foodie scene out there. Great city, good host. So yeah, I enjoyed it. How about you? You recovered okay?
Yeah. Oh, I had a fantastic week. And yeah, I have finally recovered. It's been a couple of weeks at this point, but now I can say that I'm finally recovered.
Yeah, no, which is good. It does take a little bit of recovery, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's a high energy week for sure.
Okay, so yeah, so before we get into like the topic today, I guess this is somewhat related, right?
Yeah.
But certainly want to talk about things we see in the news cycle. One thing that stuck out to me is, and maybe of no news, is that Google is postponing cookie deprecation. Did you see that article?
Yes.
And there's been a million going around, but I was reading one in Search Engine Journal that was talking about that, but not so surprised. But what about you?
Yeah, that plot twist was as unexpected as rain in Seattle, right?
Very true.
Yeah. Their statement actually made me chuckle. A Google statement. They said that ongoing challenges related to reconciling divergent feedback from the industry, which to me was just, a fancy way of saying we haven't figured out how to effectively monetize without third-party cookies.
That's a very Google statement. Right?
It is, yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah, reconciling. What was it? Divergent
feedback from the industry.
Yes.
Nobody agrees.
Spend some time on that, right? But listen, no surprise here, as we're looking at that, right? And it reminds me, right, when we're looking back at our 2024 bingo predictions, if you remember that, is I believe that was my first one. So
that was your very first one. That's right. That third-party cookie being pushed. Yeah, we all guessed it. That was your first prediction, and we do need to check back in with that card. We are on our way to a blackout bingo. We had to update GA4 training for tweaks to their predictive modeling capabilities.
Okay. Yep.
And Google is targeting spammy AI content with their EAT principles, which is expertise, experience, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. It's basically just good, reliable content. That's all they want.
Yeah, certainly like with SGE and some other things that are happening, we can spend a lot of time on that. The space is growing rapidly, but happy to see though that we're drilling through some of the items on our bingo card, and we'll do another episode on that to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure, because it looks like we kind of know what we're talking about.
Hey, which is good. I hope we do it this week.
Right?
We've been doing this podcast now for about, since 2017, so I hope we got it together. But it does bring me into something somewhat related, which is or a close cousin for our topic of the day, which is first party data. And I want to talk about this a little bit more. It's come up a lot. You had talked about recovering from Summit. And with our marketing innovation roundtable group that we do out there, one of the things we had talked about was first party data. I think it's really, really important. And it is the year of the cookie, right? And not the kind that you eat, unfortunately. Although I've cut back, and that was one of my predictions too, was I'm going to drop some LB. So we'll come back to that one. But it is certainly the year of the cookie. And although I think many marketers out there have had time to prepare, Sandy, it still feels like we aren't ready, which I think is why we're here today. Now, I say that not just because of the conversations that I had, but also, I saw a recent article in MarTech. I read that quite a bit, and it stated that 75% of marketers are still relying heavily on cookies, and another 64% have planned to increase their spending on cookie-based activations this year alone. In fact, 45% of those that were surveyed said they are still spending at least half of their budget and activations on third-party cookies. And this was before Google had announced that they were delaying and kicking this thing down the road.
Yeah, so that number is only going to increase.
It is, right? So I really wonder out there, like how many of all of you that are listening fall into that category? I mean, how much of your budget is then still relying on these cookies? Because it seems a bit crazy and seems a bit scary to me that many marketers, reading this are still relying heavily on what is going to be a dying technology. But the reality is that marketers, in the end, regardless, we need ad platforms, right? We need them for brand awareness. We need them for collecting leads. We need them for sales. We need them for revenue. And that isn't going to change at all, even with this sunsetting of cookies. What is going to change, and I would argue in many ways already has, I think, is this ability to measure our campaigns much more effectively, being able to allocate budgets more appropriately, and, ultimately reaching the right people at the right place at the right time. Now, over the past 5 years, changes like this seem like they're happening all the time, but all that has decimated things like retargeting campaigns, which focus very, very heavily on third-party cookies. Retargeting audiences, looking at some more stats, I think retargeting audiences have shrunk something like 85% since 2019. And a lot of this was due heavily to, as you know, Sandy, some of the iOS updates, privacy regulations, a whole bunch of other things. I think the cool thing, though, is that first-party data really makes retargeting for the most part work again. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And it's great to know, as both of us coming from DM backgrounds, we see like 2 to 3x higher engagement and performance. And it's much more cost effective having to go for that consumer rather a second time around. So as we're talking about, third-party cookies, it is important to revisit the importance of first-party data, which is what we're going to talk about today. But before we hop into that, Sandy, I think it would be good, right? Because there's a lot out there. We've got second-party data. We've got third-party data. We've got first-party data. We got zero-party data.
What are we talking about? Right.
I want to talk about that a little bit. So maybe hopping into that, could you talk about that a little bit and maybe just a little refresher, a little education on some of this?
Yeah, we've heard a lot about third-party data in the news. And I think we're all pretty familiar with that concept, which is information that's collected by companies that have no direct relationship with the information that the individuals are about. So that's like user behavior via cookies on a website, or survey and market research, massive list that are bought and sold that introduce details about demographics, psychographics, hobbies, or purchase history. But there's a few categories of this consumer data that we should get familiar with.
Yeah.
Another one of those is zero-party data.
Yep.
This is where consumers intentionally and proactively share data points with a company via direct communication. So this is like customer support surveys. Then
people are actively sharing. I think I've heard that term first off. I think Leroy Bridges. I was talking to him, a friend. And he was like cluing me in on zero-party data at maybe DI a few years back. I was like, zero-party data? At that time, I hadn't heard of that, funny enough. But he gave me an update on that.
That's coming right from the source, right from the horse's mouth. So we might see that also in like NPS surveys, where there'll be a pop-up that says, would you recommend this platform to a friend? That's the kind of zero-party data we're talking about. But there's times when that zero-party data is sold or shared directly with partnerships that have complementary audiences. So this would be like a car dealership with an insurance company. So you can see right off the bat that the lines sometimes blur between these data types. So, for example, a survey result might be first-party data, but if that result is then shared with a partner, it becomes second-party data. But the most reliable and beneficial data to a DMO falls into the category of first-party data, which is data that you collect directly from your own audience.
Yeah, so thank you. That's a really, really, really good summary of the different types of data points there. And I think that helps folks, right? Because there's I think oftentimes, working on this side of the house, right, as we get caught up in all these terms that maybe we take for granted that maybe some folks aren't as familiar with. And I think that's a good assessment and a good explanation of what those things are. And certainly first-party data, we've heard a lot of buzz about. We have a little bit more time to prepare. So certainly with this announcement from Google, we don't want to, sit and wait again for things to happen. And looking at some of those statistics from our tech, sounds like some of us are waiting, but they're still leveraging third-party. We have to start building first-party data strategies. And there's certainly many, many ways to collect first-party data. So I want to get into that next, Andy, because as we are talking about, first-party data in the space, I think it's becoming more and more challenging to identify users, I think, than it ever has been before,
Sure.
right? It was really good for a while, and I would argue even third-party data was pretty fragmented for the most part, but it is getting more and more difficult to be able to track that. We have to factor in consent and privacy, which adds a ton of additional complexity, as you know. The way we advertise to consumers is certainly changing, right? There's more platforms or places to be able to reach customers. And then the effectiveness of those tactics in many cases are going to change as well. So taking a strategic first party data approach, we can really start to then learn what traits I think are common among users who choose to be identified and who choose to give their consent. This can help with identifying, what channels best contribute to growing, what we call unknown user groups into what we call known user groups, right? Knowing who they are. More importantly, I think as well, I think it can help identify how you can use those behaviors from that data set to really help model various audience types to help improve our contextual targeting tactics as well. So with that, what are some ways that DMOs out there can collect data? There's certainly some obvious ones like collecting email addresses. Certainly we've got all that. But what are some additional ways out there that DMOs might be able to collect some of that first party data?
Sure. Yeah, I think the good news here is that a lot of these techniques are things that DMOs have been doing for years and years. They're actually pretty good at doing it. I think a lot of times where the strategy fails is that we don't push it to the next level. But things like traveler surveys, they create surveys by targeting potential travelers who have visited your destination. They can be hosted on your website, distributed through email campaigns. You can ask questions about traveler preferences or their interests in past travel experiences. And this is how you start to identify and nurture champions for the destination brand, something that DMOs have been doing for years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Newsletter subscriptions, they are tried and true for DMOs. You're trading valued content for about travel planning in exchange for emails and names. Content downloads, they work in the same way, and they provide an alternative for those users who might be a little overprotective with their inbox.
I know you.
Yeah, I'm one of those as well. You've really got to impress me to get my email address.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, social media also allows you to track likes, shares, comments, direct messages. Collecting all those things helps you to understand your audience's preference and interest. Contests and sweepstakes, they can be an engaging way to collect the data while promoting the destination, but there's a caveat to this. You want to make sure that you are quarantining those contacts in the beginning and then just re-engage them at a later date. That way you can weed out those contacts who are just, looking to score something for free and will no longer interact with you again.
Yeah, good point there. That is something to be very, very mindful of, right? Because, contest sweepstakes, many DMOs run, and we have to think about that, right? Like re-engaging them is a smart way to do. It keeps your, we talk about data hygiene and cleansing things. I think it's a smart thing to do. So what else you got on your list?
That's right. Yeah. Event registrations. Now this one's pretty cool because the user is already committed to the event. So it's a great way to get some more personal information about a particular user because their guard is down a little bit. They've already said, hey, I'm attending this event, so I'm more willing to give you some more personal information. Interactive web tools are another one. Those are things like trip planners or quizzes on the site. They require users to input information about their travel preferences in order to collect that first party data. So we use Visit Widget. It's not just a great way to build a cool looking interactive map, but it also has features like location check-ins and dwell time so that you can actually tell your partners how long a user was hanging out at their business. That becomes a really key piece of data that you can do a whole lot with.
Yeah, super valuable there. It's a great example. I've seen many DMOs run quizzes and things of that nature. First off, consumers love that kind of stuff, right? You get exposure. You learn so much behavioral data doing those types of things as well. But that's a really, really, really good example there. You mentioned something too about doing travel surveys, and it reminded me that we're collecting some of our own first party data. With an upcoming conversion study that we're going to be doing, working with our friends at Future Partners and Miles Partnership.
That's right.
So be on the lookout for that because that is a great way, those travel surveys, you can get a ton of intelligence from those things, but you can also start to build a great database of first party data that we can leverage in our activation activities, which kind of brings me into my last point was, okay, we talked about what these types of data are. We talked about zero and first and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
You then now talked about ways you can start collecting that data, some obvious, some maybe not as obvious, or things we're not thinking about that often. But now let's talk about activating that. So how do I take that data then and put it into practice? I think that's something that we don't hear a whole lot about, right?
Yeah.
We talk about collecting it and we need it, but we don't talk much about, okay, good. How do I put that data to work? Right.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
What are some ways, Sandy, that then we could take that data and activate it?
Yeah. One great way is for updates to the website. You can use things like dynamic content to highlight interests relevant to individual users based on a past behavior. And it's a great way to adapt content across the site itself.
Mm-hmm.
Email marketing and drip campaigns to tailor email content with personalized recommendations or offers, reminders about upcoming events that they've given you past signals on before, and that this is something that they're going to enjoy.
Yeah.
Programmatic advertising uses first-party data to bid on relevant ad placements across display networks to tailor that message to specific segments.
Yeah, let me double click on that again, because I think advertising is a place certainly we can use that, right?
Yeah.
Being able to take that first party data and not only leverage it there for your bidding strategy, right? It's like, what do my best consumers look like? And then bidding more on the terms and things that they're engaging there, and the placements that are performing well, but also then being able to like leverage that data. And maybe you're going to get to this, but maybe leveraging that data and being able to load that to find lookalikes, being able to find other people on social networks or in Google's world to be able to incrementally grow your first party data, because there's other consumers in their databases that look just like the consumers that perform the best on your website and your own channels. So certainly programmatic and just advertising in general is a major way to activate that data. So I'm glad you brought that one up. What else you got?
Yeah, for sure. Content development in general and that destination strategy. So looking for content gaps, using that user behavior on the site to discover what visitors are looking for, potentially what they're looking for, and you're not featuring. That is a great way to make sure that you're providing all the information that key audience is looking for. Going right along with that concept is highlighting underrated gems in the destination. So if certain less promoted attractions show a high amount of engagement from the content on the site, we can then start to shift our strategy to feature that content more prominently.
Good point.
And I know that there's a little bit of politics behind that sometimes, but I always lean towards giving the audience what they want, because if you're giving the audience exactly what they're looking for, they're coming back to you more consistently, and rising tide floats all ships, right? So everybody wins in that scenario. So we do want to ride that line between, the politics of a destination and featuring partnerships.
Totally agree.
And speaking of partnerships, partnership opportunities can also come out of this kind of data. So using check-in data to identify potential partnerships within businesses that are frequently visited by your target audience.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's kind of like making a lookalike audience in real life, except these are actual people going to a business.
And listen, and showing value to your stakeholders and your partners.
Absolutely.
Right? They love that kind of stuff. Being able to share that type of data with them helps to, co-op opportunities, and a million other things you could come up with. So I love that. It's a great example. What else you got?
That's right. Campaign tracking. So linking that first party data to attribution models to understand the marketing efforts that are the most effective during a visitation. And of course that ties right into, web analytics. So tying that first party data into website analytics to see how different visitor segments interact with the website, and that informs your improvements as well.
Yeah, all these are all great ones, Sandy. I think again, being able to look at ways that we can activate this data, right? Because it's one thing to collect it. We got to give it work boots and get it working, right? And certainly all the examples that you shared there are great examples of activating that data. Something we want to be mindful of, especially as Google's announced they're kicking this can down the road into 25. That doesn't mean we can't start building strategies, and shouldn't start building strategies today to be able to collect this information. So when that time comes, we're ready to go. And from some of these statistics and from just my own general conversations around the industry, we are not as ready as we should be at this point in time. So being able to build these strategies around some of these suggestions that you have made will really help a DMO when the time is right to be able to certainly better engage with their audience, but make sure they're doing it in a compliant and consent safe way, and just servicing them better, right? Competition in the space for destinations, and certainly we've seen that with our industry average data, is at an all-time high. So finding ways that you can better service the consumer and influence them to come to your destination is going to involve a first-party data strategy. So these are all great, Sandy. So thank you for sharing those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great stuff there. So with all that, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this episode around collecting and activating first-party data. If you're not subscribed, please do so now. It really, really helps us out. We're also available on Spotify and iTunes, so check us out there. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Sandy. We'll see you next time, and hope you have a great day.